Debuting in New Mutants in 1983, Deadpool is now a cornerstone of comic book culture. What was originally just a Deathstroke copy quickly grew into the lovable and obnoxious merc with a mouth. And seeing as we're getting a third movie that will inevitably become another box office powerhouse, we should get in the mood for that with tiny details that only the fans would notice. Hey, it's Patrice, and here's some things you might have missed in the Deadpool movies. And just a heads up, we're going to be covering some R-rated subjects in this video. I mean, we are talking about Deadpool. Going chronologically, Dupinder is the first person we meet besides the titular tormentor himself, a character who really doesn't have a comic book alternate, missing from the pages like Harley Quinn before him. Dupinder, the lovable and deadly taxi driver, was named in honor of the actual childhood friend of Ryan Reynolds. During talks at George, Ryan gives the story of who he was. I went to the school with this guy named Dupinder, and it's actually, he was struck by lightning, which is so just utterly crazy. It's a lovely way to keep the memory of an old friend alive. And after falling in love with Karan Sony's performance, fingers crossed that he shows up in Deadpool 3. Thinking back to 2014, long time, I know, but back in the 2010s, the now famous Deadpool test footage was leaked for all to see. And we got to see an updated rendition only 2 years later as the opening sequence for Deadpool. A few lines and gags did change in that time though, but the one they kept completely intact?
Rich Corinthian leather.
Wilson is known for his left field remarks, but quoting an ad campaign from the 70s and 80s is a pretty obscure choice. Ricardo Montalban starred in Chrysler ads, and a repeated selling point for the Cordoba was the optional Corinthian leather seats, which, if you didn't know, is just a marketing term. Did you know that Samuel Jackson took the role of Nick Fury after Marvel started using him as a reference in the comic? If not, this next fact will be out of nowhere. When Deadpool had Francis up against the overpass wall, the line that he looks like he was bitten by a radioactive Shar-pei is much more than a funny way to say that he's ugly. This is a direct reference to 2004's Cable and Deadpool issue 2, page 13 for those reading at home. It's a really fun issue, so you should be. But this was the very page that convinced Reynolds that he was meant for the role. On the pages, Wade described himself as Ryan Reynolds crossed with the Shar-pei. And while filming Blade, Ryan found himself skimming this very comic, and the rest is history. Pineapple on pizza and olives on pizza is an odd combo at first, but after a few bites, I guess it works. Add a little jalapeno to spice things up, and after mixing those flavors together, stuff the crust to flesh out the flavor. And before you know it, you'll have the perfect collection of pizza's mightiest taste. Or at least I assume so, because I'm lactose intolerant. Pay attention to the name of the pizza place that Wade orders from in the beginning of the first movie, because they are from Feige's famous pizza. Kevin Feige, if you're a subscriber to this channel and somehow didn't know, is the president of Marvel Studios. A move that paid off because we now get a Deadpool film that is accepted into the MCU. One of Marvel's worst kept secrets is Deadpool's obsession with the Golden Girls as a whole, and Bea Arthur specifically, to the extent that the Deadpool Corps named their ship the Bea Arthur, so the movies also pay their tribute. In the first film, Wade can be seen sporting a shirt with the late great actress's likeness, a shirt that costed production $10,000. In the second, we get to see that he has named his killing katanas Bea and Arthur. Why does this monster with plenty of hard spots hold the softest of spots for one of the Golden Girls herself? The more cynical amongst the crowd will say it's a joke that's gone out of hand, but maybe, just maybe, this is his way of breaking through the shell of humor and wisecracks to show a sensitive, warm man on the inside. Or he just loves thank you for being a friend. Few schools can call themselves worse than Sister Margaret's School for Wayward Girls. It's riddled with drugs, crime, solicitation of explicit activities, and it doesn't teach a single class. Hidden away where only those who would want to go find it is the den of contract killers and camaraderie. The movies changed Deadpool's origins a bit by having the pool where people bet on who dies next at Sister Margaret's School of Wayward Girls, hence the name Deadpool. On the Blackboard, which serves as its conduit, are names like TJ Miller, who plays Weasel, Vladimir Putin, Mike Tyson, Charlie Sheen, and many more popular figures, as well as one or two infamous ones. A background gag that will grow more morbid over time. What could be more uncomfortable than carving through your own hand and then kicking yourself free of the tendril connection? Very little. But maybe a contender is dealing with the onset of puberty while attending middle school for the first time. If you didn't get the joke the first time around, Deadpool says, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret." And then Colossus is splattered with his wrist blood. The joke being the book, "Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret." It's a coming-of-age tale following an 11-year-old girl, and one of the topics it covers is the menstrual cycle. It's not impossible that he was actually implying that the changes Deadpool are feeling are complicating his relationship with Colossus. Or it's the blood. According to the writers, David Cunningham is, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be Worm, whom, if you didn't know, was lobotomized by Ajax and mercy killed by Wade. Why? Because he was the closest thing Wade had to a friend. The movie stays pretty close to the source material on this. He isn't called Worm, but he and Wade share a similar jovial connection. And at the end of the day, it's the name taunting of Francis that causes his death. Which brings me to a serious question. Wouldn't it be much more cost effective to just stick everybody with an EpiPen to get that adrenaline pumping? I don't know. Just shooting ideas. In another reality that's far away and can't hurt us here, Deadpool is shirtless and his mouth is sewn shut so he can't speak. Why the writers did this, nobody can know for sure. Maybe they took a page out of Lou Ferrigno's Hulk book and wanted to distance themselves from the character in the comic, or it was just for the irony in it. Either way, you'd have to be blinder than Al to miss the 3 obvious references to this misfire. I'm sorry, we love you, Al. When picking up the figurine to get the wham underneath, when Ajax threatens to literally sew his mouth shut, and to the end of the second movie where he just goes ahead and shoots the poor bastard in the past.
Join us. Use your powers for good.
Heads up.
A Russian farm boy with a heart of gold and a skin of steel. Colossus plays a big part in both movies, acting as the near incorruptible moral compass. Though Wade is often not traveling north on purpose. Any Man of Steel that upchucks stomach fluid of a metallic gleam is one to be reckoned with. At the end of the first movie, his heaving looks like a small waterfall of mercury, and it's as odd as he is chrome throughout the movie. Colossus can change at will, still we've yet to see him as Peter Rasputin, who, as Deadpool so aptly pointed out, is actually a really big brother. Finally, when fighting the Juggernaut, when Colossus is thrown against other metallic objects, small sparks fly. A cute little detail to add. Deadpool has never been a character afraid to change the very fabric of their reality for a cheap joke. So what is a little cure for blindness on the side of that? This callback is for the movies themselves. Before Wade leaves for the climatic fight with Francis, he tells blind Al that he has 116 kilos of cocaine and the cure for blindness hidden in his house. A very harsh joke at the blind companion's expense, only for the second movie to reveal it was far from a cruel ploy. When he comes back to grieve the loss of Vanessa, we see what I can only assume, of course, is about a kilo of cocaine over a box labeled cure for blindness.
The sequel, we're gonna have cable.
Rounding off the first half of this list is a not often mentioned Easter egg in the first film. If you stayed behind or fast forward through the credits, then you saw a loving recreation of the postscript of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It teased the second movie having cable, jabbed Samuel Jackson a bit, and even gave us a chicka chicka. But if you're familiar with the DVD commentary, there is one more secret hiding amongst the wallpaper. Originally, the movie emulated a bit too much, and the studio forced the production team to change it. How did they do that? Well, hide male genitalia all over it, of course. Now, you may need an IMAX screen and 3D glasses to make them out, because I never could. You may feel shafted, but rest assured, they are there.
But it's really just a sip of tea at this point.
Zip it, Black Widow. I'm flowing.
The Deadpool 2 Super Duper cut has a few more scenes, a few more callbacks, and alternate takes that the theatrical release is missing. This cut content even has some more foreshadowing Wade loves so much in prison. When he attempts to drink bleach to off himself, the name of said bleach? Agent K, who was played by Josh Brolin in Men in Black 3. Josh Brolin also plays Cable in this film, and not too long after we meet Cable for the first time, he gets hit with a short joke. Later, Deadpool calls the cybernetic infested soldier Thanos. This man Brolin just can't catch a break in this movie. Juxtaposition is fun to use as a creative. Every horror movie needs some nursery rhyme, and any member of a biker gang named Tiny will be aggressively not. Cut to a grief-stricken Deadpool wearing what looks like the world's most adorable cat t-shirt, but it's not just some random cats on that t-shirt. It's specifically Taylor Swift's cats. A pretty loving gesture, as Reynolds is good friends with the singer/songwriter. So now there's an opportunity for Deadpool 3 to open up with another murder montage, but this time with blank space playing in the background. Yet another thing the Super Duper cut has over the original is Pool smoking and reading The Canadian Mounted. If it looks at all familiar to you, then you may be a fan of another famous comedian. John Candy reads a book by this name in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It was later written as a trivia book for the fans of John Hughes, but there are rumors of this having been a real book published before the closing of his publisher. Whatever scraps of it remain though is a pain to find. For now, we'll just settle for this amazing movie connection. Russell starts growing a little hot-headed and starts burning the abusive orphanage and its employees. We watch it happen through a short clip with a breaking news blip going across the bottom. At first that blip seems fine, just predicting some heavy wind advisories. But then there's a line about Christopher Plummer not joining the cast of Deadpool 2, the movie that we're watching, which is likely in reference to his leaving a movie over Kevin Spacey. And with allegations rising against TJ Miller, a writer snuck that in.
What year is it?
What kind of dumbass question is that, Dad?
Did you see past their disguises? If you saw Pete the Pirate, Alan Tudyk himself, sitting next to Matt Damon, then you'd be mistaken completely. See, in the credits, this pot-bellied toilet enthusiast is actually played by the famed Dickie Greenleaf. You know, the one from the talented Mr. Ripley. Matt Damon almost went completely uncredited for this cameo, opting instead to use the name of his character in the talented Mr. Ripley. But he isn't the last person on this list to go uncredited for his work. More on that later. Superhero teams are always hard to choose from, X-Forces even more so. The headshot we never got to meet the owner of that sticks in our minds more than anything was the notorious RBG. Graduating top of her class at Columbia, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a landmark of justice and freedom. The first Supreme Court justice to officiate gay marriage, co-founded the ACLU's Women's Rights Project, and only the second woman and first Jewish person to serve on the Supreme Court. Justice Ginsburg was beyond role model material. Sadly, she in fact did not join X-Force. Is it just me, or does Wade have a thing for older, powerful women?
No, I spit acidic vomit.
Oh.
Looking past Skarsgård's hilarious portrayal of the oddly named Zeitgeist, we can see this obscure level Marvel character was given the Joker treatment, and that he was drained of color and given stark black tattoos. In fact, let's focus on that ink. We have an anarchy symbol, odd choice for joining a team but we'll let it slip, a hazardous material warning that would actually be a really good warning to others, so pretty useful tattoo, and the number 116, which also just so happened to be the very copy of X-Force that debuted Zeitgeist, then almost instantly killed him off. Such a bleak foreshadowing for the few who would be in on it, and yet if you aren't looking for it, it'll fly right under your nose.
And Domino. And Doubtful.
It's safe to say that Deadpool doesn't really get Domino. Her proactive nature being what causes her work to pay off is hard to get your head around if you spent your life fighting uphill to not self-destruct, only to be robbed of the ability when you want it most. Explaining how her power works gets heated at first, but then cools off once she proves herself indeed lucky. Deadpool didn't pull any punches though. Rob Liefeld is notorious in his earlier work for his odd proportions and failure to draw sensible feet, going so far as to just hide them in panels or keep them covered. And there is no shame in that. We all have one aspect of our work we aren't the proudest of. Plus, not to mention, Deadpool himself stems from that same creativity.
That's such a you thing to say. Go get him, Tiger!
Ryan Reynolds was not credited for his voice work in this movie. Juggernaut was a huge threat in the climax, so much so he had to be incapacitated by sticking a live wire where sparks had never gone before. So could you believe he was credited as himself? Just a fun hidden detail that will now probably nag at the back of your brain every time you hear him growl his line like a disturbed bear.
Gary,
My name's Peter.
I realize that you're new to this, but relax. You've been chosen by a higher power.
Deadpool is not a mutant. He is in fact a mutate. His healing abilities were not inherent to him and had to be reactivated by an outside chemical mutagen, which might be why his little baby legs give me such horrific vivid nightmares. They're just so unnatural. Luckily, this fact isn't about them, but what's above it. His shirt is almost exactly like the one worn by Chunk all those years ago in the Goonies. And who plays the older mean brother? None other than the fresh-faced Josh Brolin.
I'm saying hi back. You guys make a super cute couple. Yeah.
Risks are something that movie studios will try to avoid like the plague. Why would they risk anything with change when they know what works so well and what makes so much money? But we are way past the days when Deadpool could be considered risk making, mostly because of the huge risk involved in greenlighting the first one. An R-rated superhero movie should have the freedom to explore all those potential action sequences, and Deadpool was no different. Wanting a huge gut fight at the end of the movies had to be written away with that ever pesky to sit still duffel bag.
We need backup.
I will bathe in the blood of your enemies.
I have not been very fair to you, dear viewer. There has been so many hidden references and gags pointing to Rob Liefeld throughout both movies. He has a full cameo in Sister Margaret's at the beginning of Deadpool, his name is on the CGI coffee cup, his name is on the death pool, and we've already discussed his issue with feet. And last but not least, in the first Deadpool film, when Vanessa and Wade are trading their skee-ball ticket winnings for some cool prizes, there's a huge stuffed dog wearing a Deadpool costume, referencing the character Dogpool, who is exactly what he sounds like. a dog version of Deadpool from an alternate universe. In the comics, Dogpool would later be recruited to become a member of the Deadpool Corps in Earth 616. You know, rewatching these iconic movies not afraid to embrace their comic book origin and edge reminds me of just why these movies are loved, which is all the small jokes and gags meant to only work with a handful of people mixed with fun and exciting plots. And now we're all just anxiously waiting to see how Deadpool 3 plans to portray Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in 2024.